We're going to start. Tonight we're going to start sort of as a continuation of last month's conversation. Last month we were talking about rights and conflict. How does our society deal with situations where two people have rights that everybody acknowledges exist, but they are in conflict? For example, somebody walking down the street and somebody driving a car. Um, both are rights, and at some point, you get into a situation where somebody has to make a decision. Because if you don't make a decision, there's going to be a crash. So, in this particular case, it was suggested that we didn't talk last month about affirmative action in the employment sphere. Um, is it fair to have to decide that you want a particular group or of one kind or another to have priority for a given job? Um, Now you have essentially, it's not the government, but it's two private groups: the person who's doing the hiring and multiple people who are trying to obtain the employment. So in any case, that's kind of an intro. Um, Steve, this was your suggestion, so you want to start us off?
Well, I was going to inject the thought that when it comes to affirmative action, we have some explicit writings in the Constitution which deals with discrimination on the basis of race. And so I do agree that ultimately the courts are going to decide. But I think it's very much a constitutional interpretation. Um, Affirmative action has always been trying to right a wrong, regardless of what's explicit in the Constitution. So I think we're pitting some societal goals against, the bare bones constitutional law. This Supreme Court has already decided that from colleges that admission standards, you must adhere to the Constitution strictly, so that race cannot be really explicitly down as one of the criteria for selection by a college. I know that in the paper that there's been some further action. I think a fellow named Bloom, who's a lawyer, is now instituting a lawsuit against some law firms. And it has to do with, I think, hiring practices that that explicitly involve a race. And Mr. Bloom is advocating that this is unconstitutional. That not only can't you do that from a university standpoint, but you can't do this with regard to private industry as well. So there'll be a fresh set of lawsuits, which will look at the problem of, can you hire by race alone, or do you need to have other criteria? Now we know that that the universities seem to be moving in the direction of having the applicants stating their life experiences rather than putting down what their race is. What the workaround would be in the case of employment for private industry, I don't know yet. But it's all very interesting. I personally find myself split right down the middle. I do believe that the Constitution should be fairly strictly adhered to. But I also believe in the societal goal of making right hundreds of years of past wrongs. So I think I've got to examine this, and maybe you guys will be able to help me tonight on that one.
I've got an opinion, and that is, um, I think if two applicants are equal, you know, when you line up all of the things that their criteria, if two applicants are absolutely equal, I think you should choose in um, the direction of the the person's background that has been discriminated against or marginalized. Um, you know, the so that's I think that's one way of deciding um, uh, what should be done. Um, when um, when people came back from foreign wars, they were given a much higher priority than um, than other people who hadn't gone, and they were allowed to get the jobs. As a matter of fact, a lot of people who were seeking those kinds of jobs were told they couldn't seek them because those jobs had been reserved for people who had fought in a foreign war. So that's curious, but you know, now that we don't have one, at least active, a foreign war, I think it should be um, the criteria should be clearly set down on a paper and compare the paper. And if they're absolutely equal, then you can make a determination of a group that might have been discriminated against, whether it's a female or a um, or a person of a ethnic background or whatever. That's my opinion. Hi, Omanon.
Hi, how are you doing? I'm sorry, I was running late and I was not, they were not letting me get in.
Well,
Yeah,
Paul, it's not so much a matter of if things are 50-50 and you can use this information. It's a matter of, can you even put down that category? Are you allowed by the Constitution to even mention your race by question? And I think Supreme Court has said, no, you cannot have a question that says, what is your race? Although you can describe how you grew up as a Native American or as a Hispanic, but you can't. I don't think that you can even answer or have a question on there about what is your race.
Well, there's
So
another factor that I think the courts have deliberately ignored that needs to be considered, and that is the purpose of the amendment that we're talking about, the 14th Amendment and 15th Amendment and the Civil Rights Act and a few other acts, was to allow previously marginalized groups to participate fully in society. And because they were previously marginalized, they didn't have a common start point with everybody else. And so therefore, you need to, in a sense, violate the strict letter of the law in order to achieve the spirit of the law. And that's my view. Chuck, Pat, haven't heard from you guys.
I had a bit of an interruption. I'm sorry.
Right.
I had a little technical problem, and I missed some of it. I'm not sure. I'd like to pass and listen to a little bit more discussion. Who didn't speak? Who else?
Omanon and Chuck so far.
Well, I guess,
I'm missing.
No, they didn't speak. Chuck.
I guess based upon what Paul just finished saying, that these individuals will be absolutely equal in all ways. I guess my inclination would be that there's some type of a lottery. That's the name is pulled. So there's no basis of anything that would be determining that. So that's what I kind of think.
Well, there's also a factor we haven't talked about, and that is if your goal is to have diversity, then very often you go out and recruit people in particular areas. If my goal is to have African Americans involved, I might go to Roxbury. If my goal is to have rich people, I might go to Weston. Again, it colors the group that you're looking at to see whether who I'm going to be selecting from. So is that a portion of affirmative action that has not yet been addressed? I know many years ago I was working at MIT, and I happened to be doing some consulting at the admissions department, and learned a little bit about what I was just talking about, where they recruit from. But I also was dealing with some of the hiring, and the rule at the time was kind of interesting. They said a manager could hire whoever they wanted, but if they didn't hire a minority, they had to explain in writing why not. And I thought that was a very, very effective way to get people to at least consider groups that they might not otherwise look at.
Let me be the devil's advocate for a moment.
Okay.
When we talk about we want representation, but who are these we people? Who are the people who really want equity? Is it all the people in the United States, or is it a special group of people who invented a reinterpretation of the amendment and thought that spirit of the amendment was not being followed, although it was being followed in the letter? So that's what I would ask, whose goal is it to really create the equity, what they think it should be? Do all people want that? Or is it just only those 7 people who were sitting in the boardroom? Just
I'm not sure I totally understand what you're saying. Are you saying that the people who were complaining to the court who wanted equity, as opposed to the people who weren't there?
Yeah, I'm asking the basic question from the very beginning when affirmative action was put in place, so as to provide equal opportunity and equal space for everybody, diversity. And at that time, what I'm saying is, whose goal was it to do that? Was it a social engineering project to fulfill certain guilt on the basis of the atrocities committed, or was it just give some people a little bit more so they will be quiet? That's what this is a devil's advocate question.
Or it may be that the college feels that the education of the students is vastly improved by having diversity, that everybody gains from it by meeting, people from different walks of life, different backgrounds. So there could be an educational benefit to having a diverse student body.
I mean that is the benefit. Actually, I understand that. That's why I just wanted to bring that out to make sure that we all understand that is. Although we talk about although I said whose goal was it, but the basic point is about social engineering is to ensure that everybody enriches their outlook and experience in life by experiencing the other group as well. What is their outlook? What is their experience? Enrich my experience with their experience, so that the whole world becomes kumbaya, something like that. But the question then becomes is, has that that endeavor actually failed, or it has not really been done well enough? And that's my I understand that diversity is important, we get enriched, but has that really helped?
I'd say no, it hasn't helped very much at all. Only now are universities beginning to work on legacy admissions, where students who come from a family who graduated previously from that institution are given preference. They're starting to look seriously at that. I ran across a set of facts which absolutely astounded me. We think about football teams and basketball teams and colleges awarding scholarships. And I think your gut reaction is, well, that's really great because most football players and basketball players are from the Black communities, and they will definitely benefit. But it turns out that that most college scholarships for athletics go to upper middle class white families. I know this is unbelievable. And the reason is there are so many teams where the sports themselves are accessible only by upper middle class white families. And for that, I mentioned golf, and I can mention fencing. I can mention field hockey for women. There are many, many, many sports that are funded at high levels by universities that only white families would ever consider doing it. So, this answers your question about how far has a diversification really gone. Well, it's made some inroads and it has helped diversification, but there are other hidden areas that have yet to be uncovered where whites are still given preference by virtue of their backgrounds and the economic situation in which they find themselves. So.
I have got an idea about that. And then, if a college wants to be competitive, they go look for the people, the potential students who can help them compete. I think that's that's something that that they certainly would want to promote, as opposed to just giving scholarships to people who will never play the sport, and they may not, they may never they may never have a competitive team.
I think you're referring to
I
a
guess
court
that's
case that happened not too long ago, where people were um, paying the coaches to offer scholarships to their kids. Um, a lot of Hollywood personalities are doing that. I think this is more a question of trying to provide an equal playing field, and we'll never ever get there. But in my lifetime, it has become much more equal than it was before. I grew up in the South. I grew up, I was in Tennessee when Little Rock was integrated, in Little Rock High School. I was in Tennessee when, no, I'm sorry, that was a long time later. But I remember when the governor of Alabama stood in the door of the University of Alabama and said, segregation now, segregation forever. That isn't true anymore. There's a lot of people out there who would like it to come back, but as of right now, it's not true anymore. So I think progress is being made, but you have to continue progress because there's always forces that are trying to roll things back. Chuck and Pat, we haven't really heard much from you.
I will try to put my 2 cents in. There's so much to think about. But to open my comments, I still fervently hope and pray for the day when this committee can meet in person. I don't mind doing this electronically, but I think we lose a great deal by not seeing one another face to face. I think it's critical in terms of convincing everyone with regard to what your views are. At any rate, with regard to the subject of topic at hand, I don't know. I mean, we can roam around and talk about what's happening today. I think we all know what's happening today. Try to put into effect fairness in terms of choices, whether it's sports or business, or whatever it happens to be. Although it's probably not so effective in business. Anything that affects the general public. I think maybe if we go back to a very fundamental formula and agree to it, and that is that there's a discussion by the group with regard and an agreement that whatever decision is made, that the other party will abide by it. Today we're constantly in disagreement with whoever, and that's part and parcel of what we're talking about. So, just going back to a very simplistic, basic, and that is you assemble everyone who's involved, and they have to agree that, and I know this is difficult to do, but if you can get both parties to realize that, and of course, the basic question becomes, well, who's going to decide which side has the right? It has to be agreed upon by the entire community that we're going to pursue, or we're going to allow this particular aspect of the problem to me. I'm not sure if I'm making that much sense. What I'm trying to express is to get back to basics, a very basic formula. You may say, and I'm sure that what I'll hear is, well, it's much too complicated. The issues are too complicated. We're too far along on that road. We have to make decisions. What side do you want to belong to? I don't think it's ever going to be resolved. There's always, we have two parties, Democrats and Republicans, and we can't get along. Totally disagree on everything. And this seems to affect everything, the way we live, how we, it's part and parcel of, I guess, education, that we have to learn to accept what the other party, what their potential is. And we have to be willing to give the other side a chance. We're not doing that today. We each get up on our box and claim that we have the right way. And I'm as guilty as anyone. You can see it in our parties today. I'm taking politics in particular as part of what we're discussing. How do we resolve that at this particular point? I think it's extremely difficult. You have to teach people to be willing to give in a little. Everyone insists on, everyone claims that what they believe in is the only way. I don't know, maybe it's part of education, teaching people to be a little bit more humble, a little bit more circumspect, a little bit more understanding. That's extremely difficult to do. We're so far along on that road that each of us has a notion, an idea, a bent, if you will, for some aspect of life, and we're gonna go to bat for it no matter what. And I'm as guilty as anyone of that. I guess what I'm talking about is a little bit of humility. I don't think we'll ever find it, but I think the answer, the potential answer for people to start over and to begin to agree and unify our country in particular. And I'm assuming that all of you use our country as a measure of what we're talking about here. How much agreement is there, and how little agreement, I should say. I don't know. I think it's extremely difficult. I don't know as there's an answer out there. There are possible theories that we can try, but I think that no matter what you say, you're going to find people on your side and people who disagree that are on the other side. It's a difficult problem at best. I don't think that I've added anything worthwhile to the discussion, but
no, that was very, very good, Pat. I appreciate your thoughts there.
Chuck,
I
we
would
haven't heard.
like to see us consider somehow, all of us, first of all, the first thing you have to do is to get everyone to agree that we're going to try a different method in order to come up with fairness and a sense of who has the right to cross the street, or is it the automobile that has the right? We've set up temporary laws. We use the lights to govern, and people will even disagree with that. At any rate, I'm not sure if I'm making any sense. I just think that we have to try to look for a huge sense of fairness for everyone. And
Pat, I think you're right in that we need to get there, but I don't think anybody at this point can see any path that we will get there, because the two sides are so diametrically opposite. What one side believes, the other side is absolutely against, and vice versa. The two sides are not willing to compromise on anything, and that's really the problem.
yeah,
I think one of the problems is that one side is in the minority, and they want to rule, and that's the big problem. They want to rule the majority, and it's just, and the majority doesn't want to let that happen. So right now, I don't see anything in the near future that's going to help.
Yeah. I understand, and I can agree. My worry, my real concern is, and here we have it right in front of us here in America, that discord. And, you know, it can only, I think maybe that's part of the answer. If everyone realizes what the potential for disagreement is, and realizes or is made to understand what the potential is for agreement. Now, it doesn't mean you have to agree on everything, but you have to agree to give the other side an opportunity to speak or to do what they have to do, and listen to them. Today, politically, we both sides don't want to hear what the other side has to say. And I don't know that there's any way out of that enigma other than to continue to go forward until, and it seems to me we're on that road where the disagreement becomes so strong that God only knows what happens. I'm not sure if I'm getting off topic here, but you'll have to forgive me. I'm sort of a newfound babe here with the program. I've been away for quite a while, so you have to bear with me for a little bit until I get my my parameters and my views organized. At any rate, it's a terrific topic, and I'm sure that we can, you know, very simply, how can we find a way, or is it possible to find a way where people can agree to reasonably disagree and not be willing to pick up their weapon as soon as there is disagreement? You know, it's a very human thing. It's a real test for humanity. It's a real test of we as humans. You know, it's so easy to disagree. It's so hard to acknowledge that the other side is different. And I guess maybe, my screen just went blank. I don't know if I think there must be a message there. I'm talking too much.
I was going to point out that for both affirmative action and political disagreement or agreement, I would like to remind all people the basic Judeo-Christian, or you could call it Christian, ethic about golden rule. And they have all forgotten that in affirmative action as well as in political discourse, to allow that humility, to allow that ability to and understanding to agree to disagree and then move forward. That has been forgotten. And I don't know how to bring that up.
No, it's a good point.
Chuck, you didn't really have much to say the first time you talked. Any responses to any of this?
Well, I'm kind of thinking as I've heard different things to be said. I guess I'm inclined to think that we have an ability to get together more than most people want to think, and I think we've got to be more open to discussions with other people and not prejudge what somebody's position may be. And there's really three sides. There's the Republicans and Democrats, but then you also have people that consider themselves independents. And so I just have a real dislike for the use of some types of language as far as when people get all heated up and they are disrespectful to the other side and they don't allow the other side to be heard. And I think we need to be able to be more open-minded. I don't know how to say it any better at the moment.
How do you teach open-mindedness?
I think
I agree with you very much.
from my,
How does one teach being open-minded?
I think you start by stopping somebody when they start to talk where they're coming with their position and they appear they don't want to hear your side.
Yeah.
And you have to be prepared to politely tell them that they need to listen to what you're saying.
Yes.
And that you will also listen to what they say.
Yes.
And not allow them to, so to speak, bully their position and not let you speak. And stay away from some of the hateful language that people just by habit sometimes use in their discussions of things. It's not easy. And depending upon where you live and who you associate with, you may surround yourself with people who are like-minded, and that's not necessarily the best thing to do. You need to mix it up with some people who may have a different opinion of things, so you can learn from those people why they think that way. And maybe you need to change your mind on some aspects of what they're saying.
Isn't that part and parcel of what character is all about? And I've had a crazy thought. What if we elected someone as president who was not of the Democratic or the Republican Party? What if we elected someone for the first time, I think, who was so-called independent, assuming that they're normal, their characters, and they're good character, they have good standing, they've had a good background. But if we elected someone who was an independent, how do you think it would affect America? How do you think people would begin to, and this individual, could he or she actually promote a kind of fairness, a balance between, obviously, the two parties? That's the big issue today is, everything that happens every day, we can't wait to hear about. If you're a Republican, you want to hear about the worst of the Democrats. And if you're a Democrat, you want to hear about the worst possible that is happening. And it's happening right now in front of us. The troubles with Mr. Trump and the troubles that are coming down the lines seemingly with the president, Democrat, Republican. I don't know if we could break that mold and get someone in who was literally, I want to say neutral. What I mean is nonpartisan, and who would, I don't know. I think it's possible to a huge injection to especially I'm talking, my reference point is America. I think most of us have been talking about people in general, the world, but I'm sort of focusing on America. How can we create an equality or a willingness to listen and to abide by? And maybe if we put an independent in there, I've just lost my screen. I think everyone is still there. At any rate, I've said more than enough.
You're still there.
Can I ask you a question? this individual who you're going to elect, appoint, whatever, to be president, are they going to rule by fiat, or are they going to have to work with the Congress and the courts and other power centers that exist not only in America but in all the countries of the world?
I read recently, not too long ago, about Washington General and how, as the first president, he ran into all kinds of problems that are, and he had to make the decisions with regard to not offending the two parties then. And yet he had to find the road that was best for America. I think, personally, I think that he did, I've lost the screen again. I think that he did a pretty commendable job. And I understand what your question is, Bob, and I understand where it's going. It's extremely difficult. The person who is nonpartisan, whoever he is in whatever party he has to be a very special kind of person to at least try to set the tone so that we as a country can begin to measure, listen, think, agree. It's extremely difficult. I know it is at this point.
Do you see any
But
possibility
not
that somebody
impossible.
like that could exist? It seems beyond the realm of imagination that somebody would be able to garner enough support from both Democrats and Republicans in order to win an election. It just doesn't seem possible to me.
Yeah.
Well,
No,
I
that's
think
why
it's
I would try to
I
choose
agree with you.
someone who
Ideally,
is
that's what I'd
not
love to see.
Democratic or Republican. I don't know
Huh?
if that person is out there. He would have to be an independent, and he would have to be a very special kind of person. At any rate,
well, my point was not so much who the individual was. You say he's an independent, therefore he's got to get support from a variety of different sources. My question is, how does he rule? Does he rule by fiat? In other words, I said it, so therefore it is? Or does he go to Congress and convince enough of the people in Congress who are not independents, they're Republicans or Democrats? Excuse me.
He
Does
has to be able to convince the middle group,
right.
Okay.
the
I think
Republicans and Democrats who are in the middle as opposed to the extremes.
I think what you're actually asking about is to get rid of the two-party system as we understand it and go to a more multi-party system and a parliamentary kind of system like they
No.
have in most of the rest of the world.
No, my my intent was, in order to break the non-agreement that is currently the way we're living, the way our government is being run, there's no accord whatsoever. I just want to interrupt that strain and bring in someone who can possibly, and I know it's extremely difficult, talk to both parties and say, this is a new beginning. We have to agree that one party or the other is going to make some of the rules or whatever, and the other party has to agree. What I'm trying to get to is even a modest sense of universal agreement of any kind. I think we've had nothing but discord. Anything that we can do to bring America in particular, bring everyone or almost everyone in agreement to anything. And I just can't, I don't see it if we have a Republican and it's part and parcel of our government, the way we live, the way we've set up everything. The reason I point to Washington, because there was nothing for him to be concerned with. He was the first one, and he did make an effort, I think, from what I've read, not that much, but he did make an effort to satisfy all of the American. And I know it's completely different at that time compared to what it is today. There's so much more. Basically, I don't know how, but if we could find that very elusive road to at least be willing to give one party or the other party an opportunity to do right. And of course, that's critical. To do right is almost impossible today.
Do you think there's a country in the world that you can point to that sets that kind of example?
No, there's a little island out on the way deep in the Pacific, and there are about 20 people there, and they manage to live very nicely. If we can only copy them.
So what we're experiencing is not different than most other, maybe all countries in the world are.
Yeah.
I would tend to agree. By the way, I do have to question Pat. You say we can't agree on anything. We're totally loggerheads. Yet early in Biden's presidency, he was able to pass some bills bipartisan, because given the way we are right now, nobody is in a position to dictate anything. And there's certainly people, in this case on the right, who are making it a tenet of their campaigns that the Inflation Reduction Act was criminal and needs to be thrown out. In the same ways they were saying the Affordable Care Act a number of years ago was criminal and needed to be thrown out. But they were passed in a bipartisan nature. And instead of saying we didn't get everything we wanted or the other guy got too much, maybe what we need to do is give these things a chance, because ever since I think it was about 6 years ago, when the Republicans had control of Congress and had control of the presidency, and had been for 7 years, more than that, probably 8 years, campaigning about how horrible the Affordable Care Act was, when it finally came up for a vote and it was not repealed, suddenly when people started talking about it again, they said, oh, we hate Obamacare, it's horrible, it's socialist. The Affordable Care Act, oh yeah, that's important, I care, that's important. You can't do anything about that. Social Security.
I just want to interrupt you, because within the past couple of weeks, I've heard Biden say that the Inflation Reduction Act, he should never have named it that. It really is a climate bill.
No, if you look at the dollars involved, it's very much more of a economic thing than a climate bill. There is money in there for the climate.
I'm just quoting what he said.
Well, again, context. What was he talking about? What questions was he answering?
Anyways,
I mean, if you look at the money, and very often when you're talking about Washington, or for that matter, Boston or Concord, New Hampshire, or whatever, they talk about these things in terms of money, because it's the only common thing that everybody sort of understands. But even there, a group of the population got some money to do something, hopefully, to resolve some climate issues. The original act is about a third, I think it's a third, I may be wrong on that, of the size that it used to be. And the climate portion of it is significantly less than it used to be because there was compromise. Because you gave somebody else something in order to get what you absolutely needed, and you understood that you weren't, that what you were getting was not nirvana. It was progress. Talking to Pat for a second, I hate, and using the word very carefully, I hate extremism. I believe strongly in compromise and progress and adjustments. But when we start going to extremes and say there's only one right way and everything else is bad, then I personally think that democracy suffers.
And I nominate you to run for either vice president or president.
You know
With
why I
that
should
philosophy, I agree.
I should run
And if
because
you
I
can
don't want
get
the job.
country to agree with you, we will have achieved something that I'm talking about,
Right.
something that I'm advocating. So would you consider running for president?
No, I
Why
don't
not?
want the job.
Your philosophy is probably in very large measure the answer that we need.
I'll tell you what I'll do. You get me a president who will listen to me, and I will sit in the presidential dining
Don't
room.
need it. You have 4 or 5 of us here. It's a beginning.
Okay.
You've
No,
got
I-
5 guaranteed votes.
I'm not sure I would vote that
I'm
way.
not sure. No, I don't know.
Let me remind you, Pat.
Well, we have to put him on the chair and ask him questions, a lot of questions to, and then maybe we can come up with a possible agreement based on what he said, though. That's pretty much the kind of thing that I'm looking for. Anyway.
Let me remind you, Pat, if you tuned in to the presidential debate yesterday, Republican presidential candidate debate, one of the themes that jumped out is leadership is not consensus. That's what one of the things I struck in my head, that's what one of the things was brought up. You don't lead by consensus. You have to say something and get it done. Yes. Don't listen to everybody. So there you go. That is the answer to your question, your whole theme there.
And by the way, I don't want to have it be left that only Republicans see this.
No,
there are Democrats as well. Although I will say that some of the extremes on the left are more willing to compromise than the extremes on the right.
I don't agree.
AOC is.
Say that again. The extremes on the left.
The left, and I'll use AOC and her group as an example, are more willing to compromise in order to make progress.
I don't agree with that.
Well, the Affordable Care Act.
I don't see that, Bob. I'm sorry.
I'm using the Affordable Care Act deliberately.
Yeah,
they were very, very, very against the compromises that were made in order to get Republican support. But ultimately, they said, okay.
I think it was a little bit more.
We'll live to fight another day.
I think it was a little bit more complicated than how the whole process in which you're making it sound like.
Well, yeah, nothing is simple. I totally agree with you on that. But at some point, you have to simplify things, at least to some extent, not totally, because then you lose the substance. But to some extent, you have to simplify, because otherwise, your explanation means that nothing else gets done. But
what
again,
if the 5 of us
Yeah.
decided to establish or to declare ourselves as a party, a political party with no particular bent, left or right. We're strictly center. How could we convince America, in particular, for the moment, to join us? What would we have to do? What would we have to say? What could we offer as a benefit if everyone in the country, the most extreme left, extreme right, how could we get them to join us? We are the party of the center. We are the party of the best for all of America.
We can't even get the six of us to agree on anything.
So
I'm not sure that's true,
That's-
Paul.
we have to
What-
We
define what
can't,
that center
five
is.
of us, and we can't even agree here.
No, we have to define what that center is, and then we run with it.
Yes, that's the key.
Yeah.
I guarantee you that in the, what, 5 or 6 of us, we will not agree as to what the center is.
Well,
We
you-
might
Now,
agree
yeah,
what
but
the goal is.
yeah, but Bob, now you're coming down to human personality. You know, I mean, everyone has to be. Maybe that's the problem. Everyone has to be willing to give up something
Yes,
in order for all to succeed.
right. There are
That's reasonable.
330
Is that
million.
possible?
There are 330 million people in America. We couldn't agree as to what time it is.
Couldn't agree what?
As to what time it is.
Could we try?
We could try. I agree.
See, you're being partisan now when you're insisting that we could never agree. You can't do that. You have
Well,
to say, you have to be willing to try,
Oh,
and you have to convince everyone that at least they have to try.
I'm willing to try to
I
convince Chuck that he can agree with me, but I don't think it's possible.
I think there's some things we could agree upon, Paul.
okay, well, that's a start point. I very much would like to get, and I think where we could get some agreement personally is if we agreed as to goals, measurable goals. I
Yeah,
think we could probably, nobody would be totally happy, but I think we'd be able to come to an agreement on a goal of some kind.
I agree with you. Not only that, it's important to have a goal in front, you know, as what we're working toward. It tend to give everyone a sense of agreement, a sense of working for something common. But what exactly would the goal be? I don't know.
Well, one goal could be energy independence for the United States.
And
Perhaps.
it's a wonderful goal, except for one minor detail. We already have it. We
Yeah.
export energy. We import some energy as well, but our net is we export more energy than we import. So
Yes,
how is that a goal?
No, that's exactly why I brought this up, because
Yeah.
it is not really accepted by people. It's not well known by people, and they keep on saying we're not energy independent. But that's what, can we agree that we are energy independent because of X,